Hello and welcome to Raise the Bar, the Sky High and Fly Jump Camps podcast, where we discuss all aspects of high jump, long jump, triple jump, pole vault training. We apply all these things to both these individual track and field events, as well as training football players, basketball players, soccer players, volleyball players, anybody who needs to jump higher, run faster. We apply these things in all areas. And we are getting ready for part 2 of the Doug Nordquist podcast. Doug's a 1984 Olympic high jumper who jumped 7'8" and 3/4 in his career, one of the best jumps in U.S. history. He is still coaching and working with young athletes, so he's perfect for our discussion, and we'll get right to that. So just hold on to your seats. The next thing that I had on my list of things to go over.
One more thing. Going back to high school and community college, there was, my coach didn't know anything about high jump. He was a distance coach, and the good thing, he knew he didn't know anything about high jump, so he didn't try to do anything. Yeah, so I went to the world's greatest track and field camp at Mount Sac in 1976. John Tansley, unfortunately, who just passed away, I think 2 weeks ago.
Really?
Had 2 camps that I'd go to out at Glendale College. So I sought out, it was before YouTube and Instagram, but I sought out experts in the field of high jump because the people around me didn't have that. So I went to where I could find it.
I love that. Did you ever get a chance to work with Tellez at all?
No, I did not.
That's
Yeah. Dwight Stones was the clinician at that world's greatest track and field camp, and where it was a junior year, and I couldn't walk and chew gum. I was going through my growth spurt, knocked the standard over, and Dwight actually told me to get out of the sport before I hurt myself. So. But I got the last say in that. I do have the family record, so.
Absolutely.
He jumped 7'8", I jumped 7'8" and 3/4.
That's right. So you're a first cousin, second cousin?
Oh, yeah. He was Stonestrom when they came over from Sweden, and Soderblooms, and so yeah, it's third cousin or something like that.
Okay. How did you find that out? Was that a roundabout thing?
No, it was in 72 when he was jumping. The family said, "Yeah, he's Ed Stone's kid from."
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So it was known. It wasn't discovered later.
Yeah,
okay.
No. Yeah, it was known.
Yeah. I was curious about the coaching tree thing because I've had a great chat with one of your coaches, James Kiefer.
Yeah.
The first time I met him, he was the head coach at Fullerton JC.
Right. For years.
And I had started coaching at Orange Coast College. So.
Right.
And you were there at the time as the high jump coach, and so that was when we started, butting heads again, with our athletes instead of jumping. And I had no idea, him being the head coach, I did not know anything about his history. I did not know that he had, what kind of athlete he had been in, and that he had coached the high jump and all these different things. So
and a guy named Lout, and a guy named Banks, and a guy named Tully. Yeah, he had a couple of kids in his background.
Had a couple, yeah. So there was a lot of great knowledge there. So you worked with Stones and Tansley and Kiefer, and then another coach.
Washington State, Rick Sloan at Wazoo.
Rick Sloan, okay.
He was a '68 Olympic decathlete. And an interesting sidebar on that: when we were in the weight room, he'd had his Olympic ring on, and he'd spot me. And in this bench press, all 100 pounds of me,
right?
And I'd see that, and I'm going, okay, I'm going to have one of those one of these days.
Absolutely.
That was one of the things that kept my Olympic dream in the forefront as I was going on in my career.
And then the last one on the coaching tree that I know of was a coach that we shared in common was Alan Henkel.
Right.
And I was curious as to how that relationship started and all that, because I know he was at UCLA when I met him.
Yeah, well, after my disappointing '88 Olympic trials,
in the heat.
experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I retired. I mean, I drove home and I didn't train for till January, and I said, okay, well, let's get this going again. And I was pretty adamant about not taking any performance enhancing drugs. And
Right.
Alan was trying to start a company called,
Athletic
well, it
Corp.
was Athletic Corp, but he was trying to start a, a group of athletes that would sign a affidavit saying they're not using drugs, and they would be
Right.
drug tested on a regular basis. And I went to the first meeting, or one of the first meetings, at a hotel in Redondo Beach or someplace out over
Right.
there, and we started talking, and I felt, Jim, yeah, I'm still good buds with Jim, and but I just felt like he had his program and had his priorities there. And so I said, let's give Alan a try. And I remember the first couple workouts, he's telling me to do these things, and I'm going, you're, because they were counterintuitive what I had been trying. And I said,
Right.
well, let's give it a shot. And it sure worked out. But he was very meticulous in the planning, the workouts, um, and the to the diet that I was supposed to be eating,
Right.
so he was very meticulous in all of that.
So yeah, I had the experience of training with him for my last shot at the trials. And when I say that, I mean just to qualify. I never even made it to one. And I tell people that I trained for the trials
Yeah,
themselves, but I never actually was able to get there. And
right,
your year in '84, I think I was a sophomore at UCLA and had not jumped 6, 7 feet at that time.
yeah,
So my goal was to jump 7 feet,
right,
and ended up jumping 7.2. And it wasn't until that year was over that I realized that the Olympic trial qualifying height was, like you said, was 4.25, I think,
four and a half, I
four and a
think.
half.
Yeah,
So
20,
two,
23, 24. I don't remember.
yeah,
24, I think,
22 is three and a
because
half. So
yeah,
yeah,
24, I think, was a trial.
so yeah, it was. And I had, to be honest, I didn't even have that on my radar. I was
Right,
trying to jump 7 feet, and then 7.2 was kind of bonus, and all that. And then, I was only what, 22 in '84, I think. So in
yeah,
'88, I was thinking, okay, and that didn't work out. And then so '92, I think I was getting to 28 by the time I
right,
started working with Alan, and that was there were a few eye openers, like you said. I'd been jumping since I was 12, so 16 years of, you talk about counterintuitive. There were a lot of things that I was like, I think I was an old dog that couldn't learn any new tricks, But so
yeah.
Alan Hankel, awesome. And do you think he was instrumental in you getting 7.875? Was it just with the new techniques and all?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I was fitter than I ever was, and he really, yeah, I had more speed to the bar than I ever had,
Right.
and it was just a good relationship, and yeah, so
Faster,
his
and then, I keep wanting to. I keep playing your run throughs in my
hmm
head because I'm trying to explain to my kids the need to run through the bar, accelerate, and run this radical hairpin curve that I saw.
right,
The only person I've ever seen do this is you.
yeah.
And
I,
when I
I
watch,
have a hard time getting my kids to do it too, so don't feel
right.
bad.
Well, I apparently for good reason, because it's not that easy. But
Yeah,
I was watching the body lean at takeoff and just incredible speed. And you're watching somebody who's 6'5", who's running their curve so hard, leaning
hmm
so hard to the left that they look like they're about 3 feet tall.
yeah,
And I'm watching you go around that curve, and I'm like,
yeah,
oh, that's when things started to click in my head. Where I'm like,
right,
I understand the curve now. I understand why he's going straight up, and that's
yeah.
but not easy
Oh,
to
yeah,
get across,
it's not, yeah, it's not a natural thing at all.
right?
But I think that goes, I think Rick Sloan at Wazoo I remember, we used to run the approach without jumping. And in fact, we ran it so much, almost too much, I think, before, my first year up there, when I got to the bar, I forgot to jump. I
Right.
forgot how to come off the ground. So there's a fine line of John Morris. Do you remember John
Yes,
Morris?
yes.
Cal.
Great jumper
Not
from
it.
Cal.
Yeah, yeah. He can't be a dummy if he's at Cal.
Right.
But he, I remember at Cerritos where I jumped 7/8 he jumped 7/7 from 5 steps
Wow.
because his full approach just never got him into the right place.
Right.
And he always asked me, "How do you get such a good approach?" I said, "Well, I run the approach." And it's like, you're at Cal, you're smart, you should be able to figure this stuff out. And I'm glad nobody figured it out because he would have really jumped high
Oh my
if he
gosh.
would
Yeah.
have been able to carry the speed from a full approach that he did on his 5 steps.
Yeah. Well, it's a lot easier. I learned that my first time over 7 feet at UCLA was from a standing 5 step. So
Hmm.
I learned that it was easier to control
Right.
and manage, but then you have trouble. You kind of
Yeah.
stall up on top of
Well,
the bar, and you can't get into the pit if you're going too slow. So
right. And that's the thing that, I try and do with the kids that I work with. You know, just last week we moved back to a 10 step. We
right,
started the year competing with a 6 step, just
right,
nice and slow, just working on the acceleration, trying to run a good curve, and then moving back to an 8 step, and now we're going to end the season here at a 10 step. And every time we move back, I keep telling them everything happens faster. You've got to be quicker. You got to make sure you got to stay in that curve becomes harder because you're carrying more speed,
sure, yeah.
and so yeah.
Much easier to blow through when you're running faster.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it was fun. Yeah, a couple of them did that yesterday. I said, "Wow," because they're not trying to run faster, but they have 2 more steps, so they end up getting moving
right.
faster, and they do miss that the curve.
Now, I wanted to bring this up really quickly just because we're both still in this business of coaching and training. And a lot of the podcast listeners, I'm sure, are going to be interested in what is kind of the latest and newest. I've been seeing some of these guys on Instagram. My first guest on podcast number 1 was a guy named Aaron Washa, who's a 6'2", wide receiver in the now defunct AFL, who's trying to make it in the NFL at age 28 or 29, that I saw do a 6-foot box jump from a running approach, 3 or 4 steps or something like that. But
And
I was
taking off of 2 feet.
taking off of 2 feet
Yeah,
and jumping up on his 6-foot boxes. And I was like,
yeah.
wow, I had my experience with some boxes and I thought I was pretty good. And I'm like, wow, this guy's, really getting up there, and
My
wasn't the
my sh-
first that I'd seen.
my shins had a good experience or a bad experience with boxes.
Oh yeah, yeah. You did one of the misses and scraped all the way down.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah. My buddy, I don't know if you remember a guy named Brian Mergenthal. Went to UCLA. You may have met him once. He was a
yeah.
scratch golfer from good friend of mine, a teammate at UCLA. Went to LA Pierce College, was a scratch
Okay.
golfer and like a 6'8" high jumper,
Right.
and then he ended up jumping 6'11" his senior year. But he did a box jump in the gym at UCLA, and he did the toe miss and went straight down the
Oh,
shin and took like
oh.
3 inches of skin, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so he
And those
worked
were
it.
wooden boxes. Those weren't the
Yes,
ones with the little rubber pad on
right.
top.
All these new
Those,
ones now with the nice foam padding and
uh,
everything. I'm like, oh, these are great. This was a hard edge wooden box, and he scraped his shins, and he went to work the next night, and he worked at this Chinese restaurant. And so all the guys are asking, they said, "You're limping around. What's wrong?" And he said, "Well, I did this box jump and I hit my shins."
mhm,
And they're like, they didn't understand what a box jump
right,
was. So he's showing them he shows them this countertop that's about 3 feet high or something. And he goes,
right.
"It's like this, and you jump up onto it." And they're like, "I don't understand." So he ends up demonstrating. He's
Right.
not warmed up. He's wearing jeans or his dress pants.
Yeah.
He hit his shin on the
Oh.
corner of this. I was like, "Oh my gosh, you didn't let them make you try it again."
Hey, Troy,
Yeah.
my computer has been doing some weird things. Let's hook up on my wife's computer. She's got a
Okay.
MacBook. So I'll,
Yeah.
yeah,
Just call back.
yeah, I'll get you back in a second. Okay.
Okay.
I'm down to 38% and I'm plugged in.
Okay. I see you.
Okay.
All
Okay.
right.
Bye.
So we're taking a brief break with Doug Nordquist. He's switching computers.
For those of you younger listeners on the podcast, Doug Nordquist still has one of the higher jumps in United States history. A lot of these names that you're hearing him throw around, from Lee Balkin, who was a UCLA great that I was lucky enough to train with and compete with for a couple years, jumped 7'6", 7'7". Del Davis, 7'7". Leo Williams, we're going to hope to get on one of these podcasts. Leo's out here now. Doug was talking about him in the trials. He jumped 7'6". A lot of these, old school quote unquote guys are still around and still active, either coaching or, in some cases, I golf with them and I listen to their stories. I love listening to them because they were so much better than I was. And I love listening to the stories of the big meets that they jumped at and the things that they learned. And, I never got to compete internationally, all these things. So I just listen like a little kid, and listen to the big dogs talk about, people that they jumped against and what they did. So Doug Nordquist jumped 7'8" and 3/4, which I think there's only a few higher. Hollis Conway that he mentioned. Hollis Conway jumped 7'10" or 10.5, I think. I don't think he's jumped 7'11". He did not mention Charles Austin, but Charles Austin won the Olympics in 96, I believe, with a 10.5 jump, 7'10.5". And I apologize to those of you that know your metric better than I do. I'm really bad at those. I'm supposed to make a chart that I can refer to, but still think like an American in just feet and inches. A lazy American. That's me. I've never bothered. I learned some of the common ones that I used to jump at a lot, but the ones that I didn't jump at a lot, I don't know as well. So, but anyway, Doug Nordquist is way up on that list of high jumpers. Like you said, his cousin Dwight Stones, an American high jumping legend, jumped 7'8" at the Olympic trials in 1984, and then jumped 7'7" in the final and took fourth, which was higher than he jumped in 2 other Olympics and placed. He took the bronze both of those times, but he jumped 7'7", came in fourth at that particular game. But 7'8" was the highest that he had reached. Maybe Jimmy Howard. Jimmy Howard might have jumped 7'9", but that might be indoors too. So that's a whole nother category, indoor versus outdoors, and all these different meets that you're hearing about. Some of them are no longer happening. He mentioned an AAU meet. Now I associate AAU with the Junior Olympics. USA Track and Field also has a version of that. But Doug Nordquist is also an avid golfer. I've played golf with Doug. Hits the ball pretty far. 6'5", he's no longer the svelte 170 that he jumped at, but he still has got a good golf swing and hits it a long ways. And from listening to him talk about some of his coaches that he's trained with, these are, high caliber people in the world of the high jump. John Tansley is a legend, wrote, like he was talking about, doing clinics and wrote books. My friend Brian Mergenthal that I was talking about earlier, the golfing buddy from UCLA, 6'11" high jumper, used to tell me about Tansley and his clinics. And apparently Dwight was teaching some of those too at Mount Sac. So there's a great legacy and a lot of ties to, coaching and training. That's where I really want to delve into next when we get Doug back on the line. If we don't, we'll finish it up with another podcast another time. I'd like to get him talking about training in particular and some of the changes that have come around in that field. That's why I'm going to refer you back to the first podcast with Aaron Washa, because we started talking about some newer lifting techniques and ideas, especially including isometrics, which, I want to get Doug's take on that. I have many technical questions, having been coaching now myself since I retired from competing back in 1988, which is coming up on 32 years. Oh my gosh. No, I'm sorry. It was 92. I quit in 92. So that's still almost 30 years. But I started coaching before that. So 88 was when I started. And, a lot of things that I've been coaching with for a lot of years were things that I learned in college. And that was back in the early 80s. So there's a lot of newer training techniques, lifting techniques, speed agility drills. My mind has been opened up to a lot of new possibilities by looking at Instagram. Has been a great teacher for me. Different people that have come to the Sky High and Fly, Instagram handle that I have, and I've been asking them if I can show their jumps. Anybody that follows, a jumper, a trainer, a coach, any of those types, I've been following, and so it's constantly popping up on my feed, and I will see, all kinds of different training techniques. All right, looks like I've got Doug back here in the waiting room. I'm gonna let him in and see if we can't continue here for a little bit. He's connecting to audio. It's just taking a second. We're the only two in my call. I never thought about doing this before, but it's a great idea doing the podcast with, you're on mute there, Doug.
I had to send myself an email.
Oh, yeah?
Because I typed it in the bar and it came up that it was an unsecure supply. So anyway, so I had to copy and put it in an email and send it to my wife's computer. So
wow.
Anyway, so
well, you're a better dinosaur than I am. I would have never figured that out.
Yeah. Well,
I was giving the podcast listeners.
Now I'm Marion Nordquist. I'm my wife.
Guys, yeah, right. I was telling the podcast listeners about my curiosity to pick your brain. I sat and talked with James Kiefer last summer for 2-3 hours. He was gracious and gave me his time. And you mentioned John Tansley, who I was actually hoping to talk to. I've been trying to find a way to get in touch with Tom Tellez, and I don't even know if he would talk with me because I'm sure he doesn't even know who I am. But there are certain minds that I have always wanted to pick. Yours in particular. I love talking with Lee Balkin when I can get him motivated to talk about high jumping.
The realtor.
I'd love to talk with even Dwight Impossible. He's a busy man and all that. He usually would tell me to come pay for one of his camps if I wanted.
Yes, he will.
But we're talking about one of the great things about this Instagram feed that I've been on for a while now, at my Sky High and Fly jump camps is watching these jumpers from all over. And it really took off last year with the pandemic because I couldn't post my own kids' jumps or workouts because I had nothing. Right. I was either going to have to go back in time and post old stuff, which I probably could have done a little more of. But I came up with the idea of, hey, if somebody would show me a jump anywhere on their profile, if I saw a high jump, I would be like, hey, can you send me this? And I'll post it. And I'd say 95% of the time they say yes. Yeah. And then when I follow them, and I follow the coaches that follow them, and I follow the trainers that follow them, I've got quite a bit of new information coming in. And, a lot of it is like you were saying, counterintuitive to what I did, back in the day. When we're saying back in the day, this is for me was the early to mid 80s. And now, 30 years later, there have been some innovations in, lifting and drills and this and that, and some may be more effective than others. So these are the things I've been dying to talk to you about. And those of you that don't know, Doug also does work with LA 84, right? And
LA 84, they do clinics there, and I coach at California High School. I coached at Fullerton College, and I still keep my feet in the water.
He's still out there trying to help these young jumpers, and a lot of these young kids probably wouldn't know anything about his background. I know Doug's too humble to sit there and go, hey, you got to listen to me because I'm.
It's funny because I've been in the same district for 37 years before I retired, and I remember having a dual meet, and I was running it. It was at Cal High, and it was several years ago before a new stadium. And one of the kids from the other school broke the plane of the bar. I said, that's a miss. And the coach was incensed. He said, I've been doing this for 5 years. That's never been a rule, blah, blah, blah. And I just laugh, and I'm going, oh, boy. So, the problem, one of the problems with coaches, high school coaches is they find the math teacher or the football coach who wants an extra stipend, and they'll put them in charge of something, and then they just start trying to figure out things on their own and don't do any research. And yeah. Anyway.
Well, one of the things I've always been curious to talk to you about, Doug. Number one, you said you were a heavy or high jumper at one time. So you're 6'5", you're
6'4".
6'4"? I thought you were 6'5". 6'4", 185 at one time, you said?
Yeah, they've got a picture of me. I was on the cover of Track and Field Marketplace when I was at Wazoo. We were at Stanford Stadium, and I look at it, I'm going, that's where I coined the phrase sumo high jumper. Man, I was big. The freshman 15.
Right.
And plus we lifted like fiends when I was up there. A rest day was, just doing 5 sets of something. Sloan, there was no such thing as rest.
Right.
He was a old school decathlete, so if little is good, more is better. So
that's American thinking, right?
Right. And then, I remember, I think it was Rick that was actually talking about weight to power ratio, taking a V8 and putting it in a Volkswagen. And that, I started thinking, and when I came back down here, I think I just cut things out of my diet. I didn't really think of dieting, but I just stopped eating as much, and I lost, I was training hard, so I lost the weight. And
right.
It's as I tell the kids, force equals mass times acceleration.
Yep.
So you can either run faster or gain weight.
Absolutely.
To jump higher.
I always tell the kids they can either be faster and lighter, or they can get stronger. So I said, you can either be like the Hulk, because the Hulk just powers up and goes, or, you can get the strength to weight ratio. Now, the questions I have for you, Doug, is when you're designing a program for your athletes now,
right,
and you send them into the weight room, what are the staples that you give them?
In our district, there's no weight room right now.
Right. Well, I mean, if you could, let's go back to a couple of years ago, and if you could get them in a weight room, what would you give them to do?
Well, just get them to be a better athlete. I think in high school, just trying to get better movement. I got a kid that came out that's a hard worker, smart kid, very conscientious, but he's only played basketball.
Right.
And so his kinesthetic awareness is just minimal. And the guy can come off the ground, but he can scissor higher than he can flop.
Right.
Because of that lack of kinesthetic awareness. So it's important, I think, just to get the kid to be able to move better, whether, in the weight room, just doing some light Olympic lifts, teaching the technique. When I was in high school, we just had a universal machine, so I was just doing leg press and leg curls and stuff like that. But the thing that you want to make sure that the kids remember is you want to create power, not necessarily just strength, because power is movement over time or something. I don't remember the formula.
Right.
And so you want to be able to move the weight as fast as you can, not, a full squat down to the ground with 1 million pounds. You want to be able to move that weight quickly. So, trying to teach them just
jack up the neuromuscular system.
Right. Sure.
Move it quickly. Yeah. Longer range of motion. Right. Is better.
Yeah. And flexibility, working that. And we were doing some, just some body work stuff on the track, because we can't go in there, and making sure the kids are doing those through the full range of motion. I forget what they call the hamstring, where you have somebody hold your feet and you're trying to let yourself down on the Norwegian.
That's
or
new,
Finnish
right?
or something.
I love that one.
Yeah. And so we were doing that, and I told the kids to make sure that you go all the way to the ground, even if you can't let yourself down, to make sure you're not shortening the belly of the hamstring.
Right.
So just making sure they're using full range of motion and doing things quickly, and creating joint stability is another thing. Shin splints are the bane of our existence now that we've got an all-weather track that we're on 24/7. So we're trying to work on that as well.
And that will conclude this part of the Doug Nordquist interview. We are coming up with part 3 shortly. We will close it down there this time, and we will pick this up again next week. As a future note for future podcasts coming up, I have interviews with Leo Williams, who was an alternate on the 1984 team that Doug talked about. Also have an interview coming up with Jordan Jumpman Westner, who was just competing in these last Olympic trials, 2021, to go to Tokyo. And then we're going to follow that up with another young Olympian hopeful was Tyler Arroyo, who also competed in the high jump at the 2021 US Olympic trials to try to go to Tokyo. So we got those to look forward to, and we got Doug that we're working our way through now.